Page 580.
What's a child started?
The 48 through 62 even. Okay, so everyone put their iPads away. We just got done doing the adding and subtracting polynomials. So what are we doing next? Multiplying. Now, as long as you remember the distributive property, anytime you got a number or anything up against a parenthesis, you got to multiply it through. This is 3 times x, and then a 3 times a positive 4 is a positive 12, and that's it. Remember, if there is a negative in front, that means you distribute it through. A negative times a 2x is negative 2x. Negative times a negative 5 is a positive 5. So, you've done these before, but now we're going to be doing monomials times binomials, trinomials. The most common one is binomial times a binomial. So we are getting into factoring, which you haven't done before. This, when we factor, which is coming up later, it's an easy way to solve quadratics. Because remember, what did you have to use before to solve a quadratic formula? Oh, I just said it. The quadratic formula. To solve a quadratic equation, you got to use a quadratic formula. A lot of times when you have a quadratic equation, if you had this one, what we're going to eventually start learning is how to factor this. And by factoring it, you can find the two solutions. Because remember, when you use the quadratic formula, you would get two solutions. Now, I'm just going to show you this. Don't be worried if you're going to be confused, because we're not even close to doing this yet. But this is eventually what you'll be doing.
By what time?
2 more sections away. So we got to spend a couple days on this section, day on tomorrow's, and then it'll be, or the day on Friday, and then next week we'll be doing factoring. So, it's also called double bubble, because you have, you've done that?
Yeah.
So what this is, what can I take times itself to get an x squared?
Square root.
X times x is x squared.
This is.
What can I take times a 6 to get a 6? 3 times 2. I could also do 6 times 1. So it's one of these two that I put here. Now the thing is these two factors got to somehow either add or subtract to make whatever this coefficient is, which is a 1. So can I combine a 6 and a 1 to make a 1?
No.
Can I combine a 3 and a 2? If I have, what do I got to do to get a 3 and a 2 to make it a positive 1?
Minus one.
A positive 3 and a minus 2, right? So, this is about as easy of a factoring one there is. What you end up with is x plus 3 times x minus 2 equals 0. So remember, when you multiply two things, if you take a times b and you get 0, what do you know about either a or b?
They're going to be 0.
One of them is going to be 0, right? Same thing here. If I take this quantity times this quantity, one of them has to be 0. What would I put in here to make that equal to 0? What would I put in there to make that? There's your two answers. So, if you did the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, square root of that all over 2a, you'd get these two answers. So it's a lot quicker doing it this way. Okay? But today we're just doing the multiplying. So what this is it's kind of unfactoring, but we have this quantity times this quantity. So remember, if this was just a plain old negative 5 in front of there, you would take each of these times negative 5, right? But there's two things here. So all you gotta do is you gotta take both of these times both of those. I gotta take this x times both of those, and I gotta take this -5 times both of those. And then you combine like terms. So the x times the x is the x times the 7x, and it's positive. So there I'm done. I did the first one times both of them, so now you do the second one times both of them. -5 times x, and then -5 times +7, -35. And then usually, not always, but usually you're going to be able to combine these two will be like terms. So it would simplify to x squared positive 7x minus 5 is 2x minus 35. Okay? Now, this has an acronym, FOIL. It's in every math book that you'd ever see. I remember my math teacher was Mr. Sedler. Do you guys ever have him as a sub? No? Mr. Sedler? He was Foston's, was he the principal or superintendent over there, Mr. Brewer? Do you remember? Principal. He was my high school math teacher in Oakley. And I still remember him teaching this, and he dressed up like a witch. And he said, "Curses, foiled again." Remember that from 9th grade. So, the reason why it's FOIL is because when you take this times both of those, you're taking the first term of this times the first term of this. So that's where they get the first times first. And then you're taking O is the outside term here and the outside term here. So then you're taking the outside times the outside. And that takes care of the first thing. And then you go to this, that's considered, this is the two inside terms. So you take the inside times inside. And then you take this one times this one, which is the last term times the last term. So that's the acronym. First times first, outside times outside, inside times inside, last times last. That helps some people, other people it doesn't. So what you can do is just remember your math distributive property is, I got to take each of these times each of those. And it just ends up being FOILed. Okay? Now you do need to know what this means because sometimes they say FOIL the answer. Okay, now that's coming up when we factor. That has to do with factoring. So, we don't need to worry about that yet. So, and this only works when it's a binomial. FOIL only works when it's a binomial times a binomial. Here, it's a binomial, two terms times a trinomial. So then you need to know the distributive property. So anyway, when you're solving this, you just got to take each of these times each of these. So take the first term times the 7x. What's that? Then I got to take the x times the other term. What's that? 1x. And then you're done with that. So then go on to the next one. Take the -5 times that.
-5x.
35x.
35x.
And then take that times that. -5. So that's FOIL.
Isn't that x right there? -5x.
You've got your glasses at home, Jason.
But we can simplify this by doing what?
Does this sound above?
Simplifying.
This problem?
No, this, yeah.
No.
Oh.
You can simplify. What two terms can you combine?
-5.
Right there. So the answer would be 7x squared. A positive 1 minus 35 is minus 34x minus 5.
What happens if we don't simplify it?
Usually they say to simplify, so it'd be wrong. So now this one, we've got a binomial times a trinomial. So it's just the same thing you do. You got to take each of these times each of these. So start with the first one. 4 times 8 is 32. 4 times a negative 11x, negative 44x. And then a 4 times a positive x squared. And you're done with that one. Then you move on to the next one. Negative x times 8. Negative x times negative 11. Remember, an x times an x is an x squared. And then a negative x times a positive x squared, negative x cubed. So when you write your final answer, it doesn't have to be standard form. It's just that's the way I'll read them every time. So start with your biggest exponent, which is this one. And that's the only x cubed, right? So put that one first. Keep the sign in front of it. Then go on to the x squareds. There's a positive 4 and a positive 11. There's positive 15x squareds. Then go on to the x's. What's that make? Yep, negative 52x. And then there is only one constant, the 32, and there's no sign in front, which means it's positive, so you just put plus 32. Okay. Now, on this one, it's the same type of problem. There's 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. 2 terms, so it's a binomial. Same as this, except here they put the binomial first. So, when you do this one, you gotta take this times both of these, this times both of these, and this times both of them. So it's the same property. So take the 2x cubed times the 2. What's that?
4x cubed.
And then the 2x cubed times the x squared, negative x squared, x to the fifth. Yeah, remember the property when you multiply exponents and it's the same base, you add the tops. So there, I'm done with the first term. I took that times both of these, so move on to the second. Negative 9x squared times positive 2 is negative 18x squared. Negative 9x squared times a negative makes a positive 9x to the fourth, because 2 plus 2 is 4. You're done with that one. So then move on to the third one. Negative 11 times positive 2 is negative 22x. And then multiply those. Negative times negative is positive. 11x times x squared is x cubed. Because remember, if there's nothing there, that means it's a 1. So x to the first times x squared is an x cubed, because you got to add the 1 and the 2. So now we got 6 terms, right? That we got to combine. So start with the biggest exponent, which is to the 5th. And that should be the only one, right? Yep. So you just put that one first. Then go to the fourths. There is only one. So put that next. Then to the thirds, there's a 4x cubed, and there's a positive 11x cubed, positive 15x cubed. And then the x squareds, there is only one. So you just put it in there, keeping the sign in front of it. And then the last term. So not a lot combined on that one.